At the airport, everything looked normal until one police dog suddenly froze in front of a passenger. No command could pull him away. His growls turned into furious barks, forcing officers to open the man's suitcase. What they uncovered inside was so shocking it left the entire terminal holding its breath. But the real twist was still waiting. Here's the full story. But before we continue, one click can change everything for you here. Hit like, subscribe, and let's see how deep this story really goes. The airport was unusually quiet for the late evening rush. Announcements echoed across the glass walls, trolleys rolled past, and passengers shuffled toward their gates. Yet amid the normal hum of movement, a sudden tension formed near one of the international arrival checkpoints. A trained police dog, a sturdy German shepherd named Rex, had stopped mid-patrol. His handler tugged lightly at the leash, but Rex refused to move forward. His posture was rigid, ears pinned forward, tail stiff, every muscle tense. His deep growl rose into sharp barks that reverberated through the terminal, startling travelers nearby. The barks were directed at one passenger. The man stood just ahead in line, clutching a small leather suitcase close to his side. He was dressed neatly in a dark blazer, with polished shoes that reflected the terminal lights. At first glance, nothing about him seemed unusual. He had cleared security scanning with no alarms, had his documents in order, and walked with the same purposeful air as any other business traveler. Yet Rex was relentless, blocking his way, barking louder every second. The crowd grew restless. Some travelers whispered nervously, others stepped back to keep their distance. Why was the dog refusing to leave this passenger alone? The handler gave a sharp command, but Rex ignored it. Instead, he pressed closer, circling the man, nose twitching, hackles raised. He barked again, this time so loudly that even the customs officers at the far end turned their heads. The suitcase. Rex kept nudging toward it. The man's knuckles whitened as he gripped the handle tighter. Sweat formed at his temple, though the air conditioning was cold enough to chill most travelers. He shifted his feet slightly as if preparing to move away, but Rex blocked every attempt. What could be inside the case that a trained police dog would react to with such insistence? Customs officers advanced quickly, forming a small perimeter around the man. His passport was taken for re-verification. The crowd of passengers was redirected, their eyes filled with curiosity and unease. Some suspected drugs. Others wondered if it was something more dangerous. A few whispered about past incidents where explosives had been found hidden in luggage. But none of the officers spoke yet. They watched the dog because in situations like this, instinct often revealed truths no scanner could. Rex pawed at the suitcase, barking more furiously now. His behavior was no longer just alert. It was urgent, almost desperate. The man protested softly, trying to appear calm, but his trembling hand betrayed him. He claimed he was a frequent traveler, that he was heading to a conference. His voice was steady, but his eyes darted around, searching for something, or perhaps someone in the distance. Why was he so nervous if everything he carried was legal? The suitcase was set aside for inspection. Officers placed it on the stainless steel counter while Rex sat a few steps back, growling, refusing to relax. The man insisted there was nothing but documents and clothing inside. Still, customs protocol required every detail to be checked when a canine unit alerted. The lock clicked open. Inside were neatly folded clothes, ties, and a small toiletry kit. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Officers sifted through carefully, piece by piece, with latex gloves on, shirts, papers, a laptop charger, all ordinary items. But Rex suddenly lunged forward again, nose pressing at the suitcase lining. He barked violently, as if warning them not to stop. The lining was examined. The edges felt unusually stiff, slightly thicker than standard suitcase material. A hidden compartment. A tool was brought. The inner fabric was peeled back carefully. Inside was a sealed package wrapped tightly in black plastic. The room went silent. The officers exchanged glances. Packages like this often meant narcotics or explosives. Yet something was off. The package was small, almost too small for such smuggling attempts, and the weight, when lifted, did not match what was expected. Rex whined impatiently, as if urging them to keep going. The package was cut open, not powder, not wires, not weapons. Instead, something delicate, something that made one of the officers freeze mid-motion. Tiny pieces of fabric, straps, a faint smell of earth mixed with something metallic. The contents were carefully revealed layer by layer. It was a small child's shoe, old, worn, with dirt still clinging to its sole. The crowd murmured, "Why would a businessman hide something like this in a sealed compartment?" The discovery only deepened the mystery. Customs officers looked back at the man, who now stood pale, almost collapsing. He avoided eye contact, lips trembling as though he wanted to speak but could not. Was it evidence of a crime, a kidnapping, or something even darker? Another compartment was searched. Another item appeared, a torn piece of cloth, faded pink with small floral patterns, clearly from a child's dress. The terminal, once filled with ordinary airport sounds, now felt suffocating. The officers knew they were no longer handling just a customs violation. They were standing at the edge of something larger, something hidden behind the traveler's polished exterior. The man was escorted away for questioning, but his suitcase remained. Rex stayed seated beside it, eyes locked, breathing heavily. He refused to relax even after the items were placed into evidence bags. What exactly had Rex uncovered? And why did the passenger risk carrying such things through an international terminal? The officers had no answers yet. The fragments, a shoe, torn cloth, raised more questions than they solved. The situation felt heavier than a smuggling case. The suitcase held pieces of a story still untold. One of the senior officers noted the detail, the dirt on the shoe. Fresh, not years old. The fabric carried faint stains, darkened, almost like dried blood. These were not just sentimental keepsakes. Were they clues? Were they evidence? Or were they something meant to be hidden forever? Rex gave one final bark before sitting firmly, eyes unblinking, locked on the suitcase. His instincts had drawn everyone into a mystery no one expected to face at an airport. Whatever the truth was, it was buried deeper than anyone first imagined. And now every officer in the room knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The interrogation room was quiet except for the steady hum of the fluorescent light. The man sat in the center, hands clasped tightly together, his suitcase now sealed in evidence bags beside the wall. His blazer was removed, his shirt collar loosened, but his eyes stayed fixed on the table as if afraid of what might come next. Across from him, two officers reviewed the items once again, the child's shoe, the torn fabric, the faint traces of soil that clung to both. None of it made sense. Airports had seen smugglers, couriers, traffickers, but this was something else, something darker and yet strangely fragile. Rex, the police dog, had not calmed since the discovery. Even outside the interrogation area, his paws scraped against the tiles, his nose pressed against the evidence bags. It was clear, whatever was hidden in those items was not random. The dog sensed significance beyond human eyes. The man finally spoke, his voice cracking. He insisted he was innocent, that he had no idea how those items ended up in his suitcase. He repeated the words as if trying to convince himself more than the officers. But his trembling hands and restless shifting told another story. Why would a businessman risk everything for such strange objects? The soil samples were quickly sent to the airport's forensics unit. While the results would take time, one detail was obvious. The dirt was fresh, as if the shoe had been pulled from the ground not long ago. And then came the next connection. A report surfaced from the missing person's desk. Just days earlier, a child had been reported missing from a nearby rural town. Her parents claimed she vanished while playing near a park. No trace was found, no leads, no suspects, until now. The child's description matched the size of the shoe and the faded fabric, pink patterned with small flowers, the very detail that sat now sealed inside the evidence bag. The officers felt the air grow colder. What was once a customs check had turned into a possible missing child investigation. But the pieces did not fully align. If this man was involved, why carry such incriminating evidence openly through an airport? Why risk detection? Why not discard the items? Unless they were not meant to be carried at all. Unless someone else had planted them. The man's travel history was checked. He had returned from a trip overseas with stops in 3 cities. Nothing unusual for a consultant in his line of work. His papers matched. His ID was valid. His tickets paid for in full. No obvious red flags. Yet Rex had singled him out with unwavering focus. The man's phone was seized and examined. One thing stood out: several calls received from an unregistered number, each just a few seconds long, all within the last 48 hours. The timing was suspicious, but without content, the meaning was lost. Meanwhile, Rex's behavior grew stranger. When brought back to the interrogation room, he ignored the man completely and went straight to the suitcase again, pawing at the edges of the evidence bags. His nose pressed against the child's shoe, whining low as if urging his handler to look deeper. The handler knew that sound. Rex was not finished. The suitcase was returned to the inspection area. The lining was examined again, this time more thoroughly. Beneath the original hidden compartment, another layer was discovered, thin, almost invisible unless touched from a precise angle, a false base. It was pried open carefully. Inside lay another package, this one metallic, wrapped in aluminum foil and plastic. Smaller than the first, but heavier. The moment it was exposed, Rex barked violently, almost leaping forward, his claws scratching against the table. Every officer stepped back. The package was treated with utmost caution. Specialists called immediately. The wrapping was cut open under controlled conditions. Inside was a flash drive. At first glance, just a small piece of plastic and metal. But the seriousness of Rex's reaction meant this was no ordinary storage device. The flash drive was connected to a secure computer, the screen filled with folders, each encrypted. But one file, strangely, was not locked. It was a single image, a photograph. A child smiling, wearing the very pink floral dress found torn inside the suitcase. Her small shoes were visible in the picture. The same shoes now sitting on the table, covered in dirt. The room fell silent again. The photograph was time-stamped just 4 days ago. The missing child. The connection was undeniable, but the deeper mystery still lingered. Why carry a flash drive with such evidence? Why hide clothing fragments? Was this man a kidnapper, a courier, or something else entirely? The man finally broke down. Tears slid down his cheeks as he insisted he had no involvement, that someone had set him up. He claimed he found the suitcase switched at his hotel, that his own luggage must have been taken. Could he be telling the truth? The unregistered calls on his phone now seemed more sinister. Perhaps warnings, perhaps instructions, or perhaps the real perpetrators watching from afar. The officers realized the case was more tangled than it appeared. The items pointed to the missing child, but the man's story suggested a larger network at play. Rex remained restless, tail rigid, ears twitching, eyes fixed not on the man but on the suitcase, as if demanding the humans look even deeper. Forensics returned with preliminary soil analysis. The dirt matched a specific location outside the city, a woodland clearing known for abandoned construction sites. It was an isolated place rarely visited, the same place where, years earlier, authorities had once uncovered evidence of a child trafficking ring. The realization hit everyone like a cold wave. This was not random. The items were leading somewhere, a breadcrumb trail, and Rex was determined to keep everyone on the trail until it reached its end. The suitcase, once a symbol of business travel, was now a map, each item inside a clue, each bark from Rex a reminder that the answers were not yet in their hands. The officers prepared a team to head for the woodland site. The man, still trembling, was placed under guarded hold until more truth could be extracted. As the unit readied vehicles and gathered equipment, Rex stood tall, leash tight in his handler's grip, his eyes glowing with determination. The case had begun with a refusal to let a passenger walk through unnoticed. Now it was pulling everyone towards something far darker, far heavier, and possibly far more dangerous than they first imagined. The question that haunted them all was simple. Would the trail end with a rescue, or would it uncover something too late to change? The convoy rolled out of the airport under the cover of night. Police vehicles cut through the city streets, heading toward the isolated woodland that the soil sample had pointed to. Inside the lead car, Rex sat alert, his body tense, nose pressed against the window as though he already knew where they were going. The suitcase evidence was secured, the man kept in guarded custody. His story remained shaky, but whether he was victim or accomplice no longer mattered. The priority was clear: find the missing child. The woodland clearing lay miles outside the city. Once intended as the site of a residential development, it had been abandoned years ago. Half-built concrete shells stood in silence, their walls cracked and covered in vines. Piles of rusted metal, broken cement, and discarded machinery littered the ground. It was the perfect place for secrets to be buried. The team arrived with floodlights, search dogs, and a tactical unit. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. Shadows stretched across the broken structures as if guarding whatever lay inside. Rex leapt from the vehicle the moment his handler opened the door. His nose hit the ground instantly, tail stiff, movements sharp. He tugged hard on the leash, pulling his handler toward the skeletal remains of a half-built house. The officers followed cautiously, weapons ready, lights scanning. Every step echoed across the hollow concrete floors. Rex barked once, deep and urgent. He circled near a broken staircase, pawing at the ground, nose pressed against the dirt. The handler's heart raced. The dog's signals were unmistakable. Something or someone was here. The ground team began digging carefully where Rex had scratched. Within moments, their shovels struck something solid, a wooden crate buried shallow beneath the earth. The officers pried it open. Inside lay more clothing, children's clothing, shoes, shirts, small jackets, all worn and stained. The sight was enough to freeze every officer in place. But Rex was not finished. He pulled away from the crate, barking furiously, dragging his handler deeper into the ruins. His barks echoed through the half-built structure until they reached a door, rusted and half-collapsed, leading into a basement-like chamber. The door was forced open. A rush of stale air hit them, thick with dampness and decay. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down. Rex charged first. His handler kept pace, adrenaline flooding his veins. At the bottom of the steps, the team entered a cramped room. Dust floated in the light, and the air was suffocatingly still. Then they heard it, a faint sound, not mechanical, not from the officers themselves, a whimper. The floodlights snapped toward the far corner. Behind a stack of crates and blankets sat a small figure. Eyes wide, cheeks streaked with dirt and tears, clutching her knees close to her chest. The missing child, the photograph, the shoe, the torn dress, all the clues had led here. The room erupted with controlled urgency. Officers moved swiftly, clearing the space for threats while others approached the child gently. Rex whined low, crawling closer, his eyes fixed on her, his body language softening instantly. The girl reached out with trembling hands. For the first time in days, she smiled faintly, touching the dog's fur as though recognizing safety at last. The officers secured her, wrapping her in a blanket, carrying her carefully up the stairs. Every moment was a victory, but the mystery still lingered. Who had hidden her here? Who had used the businessman's suitcase to transport evidence of her captivity? The answer came moments later. As the team combed the ruins, fresh tire tracks were spotted near the clearing. Surveillance cameras in the area were reviewed, revealing a van that had entered the site only hours before. The plates matched a known associate of an old trafficking group, one dismantled years ago, but fragments still rumored to operate. The truth unfolded piece by piece. The suitcase was a diversion, planted with evidence to delay and confuse investigators while the group moved the child elsewhere. The businessman had likely been an unwitting mule, targeted because of his frequent travel and clean record. But Rex's instincts had cut through the deception. The suitcase was never about smuggling contraband. It was a breadcrumb trail, intentionally or not, that led to the true location. By the time reinforcements reached the woodland's edge, the van was gone. But the most important life had been saved. At the airport hours later, the scene was unlike the chaos that had begun it. The girl was reunited with her parents in an emotional moment that silenced everyone in the terminal. Tears fell freely, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming relief. Rex sat nearby, watching quietly. His head tilted as though proud but unshaken. His handler knelt, giving him a firm pat. The dog's instincts had not only uncovered a crime, but had rewritten the ending of a story that could have ended in tragedy. The businessman, though shaken and still under review, was eventually cleared. His suitcase had been switched, just as he had claimed. His relief was visible, but so was his gratitude. He had nearly been destroyed by someone else's crime, but the truth had prevailed. In the final report, one detail stood above all. The dog refused to leave the passenger because the trail of evil was hidden within his luggage, not against him, but through him. And by refusing to move, Rex had refused to let the truth remain buried. The photograph, the shoe, the torn fabric, the soil, every piece connected, every question found its answer. And in the end, it was not just about customs officers doing their duty, nor about a traveler caught in a nightmare. It was about a police dog whose instincts solved what machines and scanners never could. The child's smile, safe in her parents' arms, became the final proof. That night, as the family walked out of the airport under the glow of the lights, Rex sat tall, his eyes reflecting calm triumph. The terminal, once filled with fear and whispers, now carried only the sound of relief. The case was closed, the mystery solved, and the ending, thankfully, was one of life, not loss. If you made it this far, you know Rex's instincts just saved a life. And trust me, stories like this only get more intense from here. Don't miss the next one. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you're here when it drops. And hey, if this gave you chills, a quick like goes a long way.